We're live. I'm gonna wait for. Okay, the attendees are already in. Hello, friends. Welcome to today's webinar. This webinar is organized by Be Wastewise. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do before I introduce the panel. I am Shweta Bandapani. I'm one of the community builders at Be Wastewise. Be Wastewise is a nonprofit organization addressing the need for knowledge dissemination and waste management. We provide educational resources, direct access to experts, networking, and try to build a momentum around the global challenge of waste. We have a global audience. Our community actually spans 123 countries, and we have several moderators, and our moderators also span 6 continents. So, if you want to know more about what we do, or if you have some suggestions or feedback for us, please write to us at connect@wastewise.be. If you are a long-time follower of our work, we also have a feedback form going around right now. So please fill that in. I will drop the link in chat. And if you see value in our work, please consider donating towards Be Waste Wise. The donation link is on our website. So now I'm going to move ahead to the panel. The title for today's webinar is The Life Cycle of a Sustainable Waste Management Project. We have Mansoor Ali, who's a solid waste management expert. He has put this panel together. He's a moderator for this webinar. Mansoor has moderated other webinars for us. Please head to the webinar section of our website where you will find more of it. And in the panel, we have Terry Tudor, who's a solid waste management consultant, Veronica DiBella, who's also a solid waste management consultant, Zoe Lenkovich, who's the founder of Global Waste Lab. And Zoe also has an interesting announcement for all of you in the course of today's panel. Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A section. Introduce yourselves in chat. You can talk to each other in chat, but please use the Q&A for your questions so it doesn't get buried in all the conversations that's happening. Over to you, Mansoor.
Thank you, Shweta, and welcome everybody. Thanks to the panel. So I was thinking about these set of webinars. This one is one on project management or sustainable project management. And the next one we are planning on the impact learning and closure of the projects. I worked in the sector for more than 4 decades now, and now I'm reducing work and slowing down and focusing more on reflection and learning. One of the things which I always feel and think about is the how many challenges and issues we encounter in the projects which come again and again. And recall that, oh, I remember I encountered or saw that issue 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and or a new learning. But also the sector is moving fast and there are lots of new development, which is very exciting. I read and watch about it very carefully. So my role is just very quickly to introduce the topic and introduce the structure of today. So we cannot cover all the aspects of project management in 1 hour because obviously it's a very broad area. There is always a debate and discussion, healthy debate and discussion, what is a project and what should be a project. I'm sure you are all aware of that. Is it learning? Is it delivery? Is it reflections? Is it fundraising? Spending the money? Whatever you call it. But there is a broad definition of projects, and we are trying to focus on few aspects of project, which is the scope of today's webinar. We also, at the back of our minds, we are also thinking that this is the project where a national or an international body funding a project to deliver something or to change something or to create a knowledge on the ground. So, but there are other types of projects as well. So out of this very large set of things in projects, we were thinking, and together with a very learned panel, I thought capacity and localization is a very important issue in sustainable projects. And Veronica not only worked on this issue, but she's very committed, and we work together, and she's always brought a new voice and new energy and force to this part of projects. So Veronica will share some of her examples and experience. Terry worked in the a lot as a mentor and a grant holder, and I was thinking that Terry's experience is both in working in the London Authority as a as an advisor, but also worked with a grant portfolio with me and other donor organizations. So I asked Terry that one of the things which we face in project management is about the contextual changes, the uncertainties, and a lot of us struggle with that, both as the mentors or reviewers, but also as a project team. So Terry will talk about that, and I feel this is an important aspect to cover today. And for Zoe, Zoe has recently worked internationally and with the UN organizations and globally, and she has been very successful in the last 2 3 years on bringing the waste management at the forefront with the new and local actors together. So I was very excited reading about what she is doing, and Zoe will talk a bit about data and the policy aspects. So what this is what how it is structured. We have a next webinar. I will be finishing my part just to say that please keep writing your comments, your questions, because we are trying to keep aside at least 20 minutes for building up a discussion based on this, which is I feel which is the most important part of the webinars. So with this in mind, I will hand over to Terry to talk a bit about these uncertainties and the contextual changes. Thanks. Over to you, Terry, now. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mansoor, and good morning, good evening, good night to wherever you may be. Yeah, so as Mansoor said, I'm going to cover a bit around sort of uncertainties and contextual issues. As Mansoor also said, there are a significant number of issues. So what I thought I would do is I would kind of focus on a couple in each category, distill it that way, and also perhaps more importantly, kind of um, make mention of some ways of mitigating both the sort of uncertainties as well as the contextual issues based on personal experience, but perhaps more so in terms of based on experience, from working in various projects and organizations, etc. So I'll start off in terms of uncertainties, and as I said, I'll kind of highlight a couple. So those couple uncertainties relate to, first of all, kind of winning the funding, so actually getting the grant funding through the door. And the second uncertainty I want to focus on is as relate to cash flow. So kind of managing cash flow throughout the project. So the first one, as I said, is around, first of all, your uncertainty is around actually getting the money through the door in the first place, so a key one to actually kind of start the project. And I would say that, I mean, there are various things that you can kind of do. And I mean, these are, as I said, these are general, but these are in many respects based on sort of previous experience and other projects and things like that. I would say make sure that you read the criteria. I mean, it may sound really, really simple and obvious, but the number of times that, for example, you read a proposal and you think, well, clearly, I mean, either you didn't read the criteria or you didn't understand. So make sure that you read the criteria, and if you don't understand, by all means, reach out to the funders and get them to clarify. If there are briefings that the funder is hosting, which is more often than not the case, I would strongly suggest that you attend the briefing, or if you can't, try to get a hold of the recording if possible. And more often than not, as well, too, there will be written briefings as well. So get hold of those written briefings if you can't attend the actual sort of verbal or oral briefings. As I said before, communicate with the funders. The funders are there. They're not, they're not these really, really unapproachable. Reach out to them and get feedback on if, for example, you put in an application, make sure that you get feedback and utilize that feedback in your follow-up applications. Or just as I said earlier, in terms of getting clarification as regard to what's required, what are they looking for, what kind of things are they looking for. They're not going to be able to give you specific feedback, but you can get, you can get you can read between the lines. Funders will try to be as transparent as possible as they possibly can. So read between the lines and kind of, get a better understanding of what's required. One of the things that I've seen work really well is engage a professional bid writer. And people may say, particularly smaller organizations say, "Oh, I don't have the money," but it's a bit of a trade-off. If you've got somebody that knows about writing, it's a useful investment to make. So don't look at it as an investment. I put it that way, in terms of maybe looking at getting a professional bid writer. And then the final thing I would say is be strategic. So don't go for a large, £2 million or £5 million grant. Start off with maybe a 5K, 10K grant, so that in that way you kind of build up a track record of having successfully bid for funding, and you can demonstrate to a funder, look, I've got this funding through the door. I've been able to manage the project. So be strategic in terms of the bids that you kind of go for. So those are sort of things that I would say in terms of that as around winning funding. Many others, but just those couple. The second one, as I said, is around cash flow, and this is a common thing, particularly for smaller organizations, kind of or organizations kind of managing like the first project. In terms of mitigating, I would say look, for example, to kind of structure the budget effectively. And by that, I mean, for example, look, if you've got big ticket items in your project, perhaps look to structure the funding for those big ticket items, like kind of like midterm, midway through, or even later in the project. Don't kind of put them at the start of the project, because more often than not, the funding will be dispersed in arrays. And by that, I mean, you've got to demonstrate that you've undertaken the activities, and then the funder will then disperse the money for it. That's what I mean in terms of the fund is often dispersed in arrays. So structure the budget in such a way that, as I said, like, for example, that your big ticket items come further down the line. Include things like mobilization, so that you've got a bit of money at the start to be able to get going. One of the things that I've seen, quite a few projects do is that the activities that they start off with are often things that, in some respects, they're already doing. So they can very readily and very quickly demonstrate, look, I've done this to a funder, and therefore then be able to draw down on the monies. So be very be very strategic in terms of your initial activities. As I said, think, is this stuff that I'm already doing that I could potentially employ, at the outset. Incorporate things like contingency. Wars happen, things happen. Think about things like inflation and those kind of issues. So when you're thinking about the budgeting, take into consideration those kind of issues and building a contingency. And then the final bit is staffing is more than likely going to be your major budget line. So be very, very careful in terms of how you go about kind of staffing the project, because that's going to massively, massively impact on your cash flow. So be very, very strategic again in terms of how you do that. So those are a couple in terms of, I'm just conscious of time. So in terms of uncertainty, as I said, winning the funding and then cash flow. As it relates to contextual issues, again, a couple here. So one external, one internal. Internal, in terms of breakdown of teams and partnerships, and this is something that that can happen, and it does happen quite a lot. For various reasons, there's disagreements, within the project team or within the sort of wider partnership. And I would say to kind of mitigate that, a couple of things could be looking at making sure that in the planning that you involve the entire team in that planning and that discussion so that there's wide knowledge across the project team about what is being done and what's being planned. The second thing I would say quickly is that put in place written agreements. And again, quite often, it's particularly smaller projects, smaller organizations say, oh, we're all mates together, we're doing this together. But when things go wrong, you need to have those written agreements in place, and they come in really, really handy. So one of the things I would certainly urge you to look at doing is to have written agreements in place from the outset so that it's clear what needs to be done and who's doing what. And then the second sort of contextual issue, sort of, as I said, external, is as it relates to sort of changes in sort of policy and, maybe the mayor of the local region changes. That happens a lot, a lot. And there are a couple of mitigation suggestions. Again, one, I would say, as you're kind of planning, but also in terms of implementation, consult widely. Just make sure that you've got a good handle in terms of, the various stakeholders and engage with as many of the stakeholders as possible at the local level. And also kind of include community stakeholders directly within the project team as well, because that means that, they've got the local knowledge which you don't have, as an external provider. And it means that you can be a lot more proactive in how you go about doing things. So I'm just conscious of time. So yeah, so just a couple in terms of uncertainties and contextual and mitigation. And I'm happy to pick up further as we go on.
Thanks, Terry. That's really good, comprehensive. There are a number of very important issues which will come back to you when we do questions to the panelists. All the participants, please keep writing your questions in the chat box so we can build up a discussion. So idea is not to answer these questions, but to build up a relevant discussions for all the participants. So now I would like to move to the next speaker, next panelist, Veronica. So Veronica will be talking more about the localization, the capacity, and the ownership building, which is very important aspect of the projects. So Veronica, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mansoor, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I think I'm going to share a quick slide with you and then just have a short discussion, and I'm very happy to take any questions. So I think one thing that I've seen in my experience is that very often projects, and especially waste management projects, tend to focus on very large infrastructure. So in waste management, this can mean, for example, large donors coming in and wanting to build transfer stations, landfills, compost plants. While these interventions are, of course, very important, what we tend to forget sometimes is that there is a lot already going on in these cities where we are trying to build this type of infrastructure. And we need to remember that it's important to consider and to value as much as possible all the activities that are there. So I wanted to share a couple of examples from my experience. So Mansoor and I worked jointly on a program which was funded by the UK government under the umbrella of the Green Cities Infrastructure and Energy Program. It was a project in Tanzania, and what we did was conducting a really detailed assessment of the recycling sector in the city. These ranged from identifying like recyclers, processors, which are formal, to a number of other actors which are semi-formal or fully informal, including like waste speakers organizations, but also aggregators, which tend to be often in a more of a gray area between formality and informality. So what we did there was, in addition to conducting this assessment, we then brought all of these actors together in the same room. And I think it was really interesting to see how a number of them knew each other, but a number of them didn't know each other and didn't know about the strengths of each of them. So what we did was really bringing them together and asking them to co-create recommendations that could then be put forward to the city and to the government. And this was incredibly successful, I think. And what we did was contributing to two slightly different goals. So when we were working in Dar es Salaam, there was also a very large World Bank program going on, which was looking at waste management across the city. So what we did was feeding our recommendations to the World Bank program. So making sure again that all of these smaller actors and the smaller recycling companies were not getting forgotten. But also we fed a lot of our findings to the government. And for me, one thing that really struck me was hearing from one of the municipal officials that they hadn't had data, and I know Zoe will talk more about data in a little bit, but they hadn't had data and new data for about 30 years. So this really raised for me the importance of what we were doing. Another experience which is slightly different, but again shows how important it is to involve local people and conduct capacity building of local people was from one of the projects I ran in Kenya. So there we were conducting an assessment of waste speakers. And what I've seen throughout my experience, especially in the last 10 years or so, is that in a lot of cases, waste speakers get interviewed, get asked a lot of questions, but they don't hear back from what's happening with the data that they have shared. And in quite a few countries, we are starting seeing that there is also quite a lot of fatigue from the waste speaker side in terms of joining these interviews. So what we did in Kenya, in collaboration with the Kenya Waste Speaker Association, was really to involve the waste speakers in asking the questions as well. So they got trained as enumerators, and they asked the questions directly to their fellow waste speakers. And this exercise was so successful that the consultancy company that was running the study decided to continue hiring the waste speakers as enumerator even after we stopped the funding, which I think was really remarkable. So again, like we don't have a lot of time, but I just wanted to share a couple of real examples. And you can see on the slides on the left, the co-creation workshop and the mix of people from a recycler to a waste speaker discussing and coming up with joint solutions. And on the right, you can see one of the consultations in Kenya. So I think these two examples show in different ways how important it is to build on the knowledge that is already there, rather than coming in and trying to create just new knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. That's really brief and to the point, and I really like the range of things. And two issues which we faced in number of projects, including Tanzania, but also in other projects. One is the acceptability of these local initiatives. Often we ignore them, and the answers are very interesting. Sometimes people say, "Oh, the turnover is very low. The number of people working are very few. They recently opened," something like that. But most of them were doing things over a very long time, and they invest their own money, they risk their own money. Well, we as international experts, we don't do that, or even international donors often don't do that, but they are risking their own money. And I really like this point about the empowering and feeding back, because once data is collected, we forget about those who generated the data, and we move on. So they come very important point. So we'll come back to you, Veronica, with more details soon. And at this point, we would like to hear from Zoe about the data and policy part in projects, and second, then you can connect. I will alert you if there are more questions or comments, but then you can connect about your initiative on the academy and training side. Thank you. Over to you, Zoe.
Thanks a lot, Mansoor, and thanks to Terry and Veronica for the brilliant framing as well about the various ways that data that these projects rely on the data that builds them, and how we collect the data and who we involve in that, who owns the data and who owns the results of the findings that you have. All of these things are really important. I've got a few slides to share, which hopefully will work seamlessly. Here we go. Do we have full screen coming? There we go. Okay, so data. I think that waste management generally suffers from a lack of good quality data, which is actually really understandable, because if waste isn't being actually managed, if it's not being collected and processed and so on, then how can we know how much is there? That said, it's really important to at least try to get some, rudimentary or basic data before we start a project. So, we've seen so many projects that are starting without knowing how much waste there is, what types of materials are in the waste. So I've given a few examples here. We've got organics, plastics, we've got some hazardous waste here like paint tins and medicines, fast food packaging. It's a big mix, but we need to really understand what the composition of the waste is so that we can best decide what to prioritize, because quite often we can deal with a lot of waste, especially organics, in one particular project, whereas the others can take more detailed planning. We also need to know where the waste is being generated. Okay, is it being generated in homes? We hear a lot about, in lower and middle income cities, there's a lot more organic waste in the waste stream than in other places. But is that organic waste actually being generated by households? Quite often the answer is no, because households are feeding the, food scraps and so on to their animals. So the majority of the food waste then that's arising is actually in marketplaces. So that makes it quite easy from a waste management perspective to say, okay, then let's prioritize the markets, start there, and then we've made a big impact on just a few sites. Okay, so it's really helpful to know where that waste is coming from. It could also be coming from schools or from offices, buildings, multi-occupancy buildings. So all of this is really helpful to understand, so we know what to prioritize. And then finally, what is happening to the waste at the moment? How is it being managed? Is it being dumped and burned in the community? How much is actually being recycled and turned into something valuable again? How much of it is polluting the environment that people rely on? All of this data is a really, really important starting place before you even start planning your project. Okay, so how can waste data really help? I mean, I've given you the four kind of fundamental questions that we need to be able to answer, at least in a basic way. And in your project, you can also plan in ways to improve that data. A lot of funders are going to appreciate the need for better data, and so factoring that into your project activities can also be a very valuable thing to do. So look, waste management is it's a municipal level responsibility. So for municipalities and community groups working at that local level, for example, it can really help you to plan services. It can help you understand your costs and track your performance over time. So you can really see what's working and what's not, and therefore what to keep investing in and what to maybe forget for now and focus on the things that are really effective. Okay, now it doesn't just have value at municipal level. this data that we've been talking about is really helpful for national government. Okay, so national government, most of them don't really talk a lot about waste management and the value of waste management. So it's down to us to demonstrate those important linkages with national policy. So, for example, I mean, most of us here on the call understand that better waste management helps prevent greenhouse gas emissions, black carbon emissions, methane emissions. So that's really helpful to help your government demonstrate how it's meeting its climate obligations. Public health impacts, is waste, is the leachate, the liquid leachate poisoning groundwater, or are drains getting blocked in the city, causing local flooding or lots of mosquitoes because the water's getting trapped there. All of these things can really help to show how everything's connected. Also with like natural resource management, if people are chopping down forest for firewood, but we could be making charcoal or biogas from the organic waste, then that's a really important link to make as well. And also with the finance ministry. This is where the real decisions get made. So if we can evidence to the finance ministry what the value of waste management activities are, then it helps to attract national funding as well. And just to cap it off then, all of this as well helps feed into these international policies. So for example, I've been working on a waste data system for the Gambia, first waste data system that the country's had. Of course, it's difficult to know exactly how much waste you've got. So we're breaking it down. How many trucks? How many donkey carts? Yeah. How many incidences of open burning did you see this week? Were they small piles of burning waste in someone's backyard, or was it a big fire at a dump site? Now, all of this evidence will help the national government with its reporting under the Stockholm Convention, which is all about preventing persistent organic pollutants, for example. There's also the Basel Convention about the environmentally sound management of waste, and the Paris Agreement and NDC's nationally determined contributions for climate change as well. So, it might seem like we're starting very small, but I hope that through these couple of slides, you've seen how actually getting the data there really helps build up a clear picture for those higher level stakeholders to then support your activities. So I'm going to pause here. Hopefully you're putting some questions in the Q&A. I can't see it at the moment while I'm sharing my screen, but please do. There's 3 dots at the bottom of the screen if you don't already see the Q&A button. And that's it from me for now. So I'm going to hand back to you, Mansoor. Thank you.
Thanks, Zoe. And I really like that you are on to the point and finished soon. There is one question which it's a long comment, and I think in this webinars we cannot open the mics, but I feel the question, and I was also thinking about the same point when we were planning this webinar. The question is, in a nutshell, is about the target audience and the continuity of data collection. So people collect data in their projects, theses, research, but also in larger projects, there is usually a lot of data collected. Often the data collection exercise stops, and also there is sometimes there is less desire and understanding of the data than we expect. I know in water sector, a lot more work is done on this part. But in waste sector, what would you suggest that how we create this desire and eagerness and uptake, continuity of data collection? So I put this question to you now as we have few Q&A while I look other questions as well. Thank you. To you.
Sure. Thanks, Mansoor. And thank you to Asifa and Mamta for popping those questions into the Q&A. They are really good questions and we'll definitely address those. So on to Mansoor's question, which has immediately gone out of my mind. No, got it. So as a project is continuing, that actually gives us a great opportunity to improve our data over time. And I'll be honest with you, I've seen, every different kind of waste management organization, project, whatever, and the ones that do the best are the ones that are collecting data, right? Because they can tell where the weak spots are, what they need to improve, whether costs are rising over time or whether they're achieving economies of scale. whether all of their waste is being generated in one area with just a few outliers, so where to focus that attention, how to improve the efficiency of their collection rounds, whether, also tracking the value of materials. If you're collecting materials in a separate way for recycling, then you need to be able to track how those markets are, because the values rise and fall. And you might find at one point that while it did make sense to collect a particular material for recycling, right now you can't sell it because the market value has dropped too low. So you're better off storing it for now and then waiting until the market picks up again. So all of these things rely on you understanding the landscape that you're operating within, and then being able to make good, informed decisions based on all of this knowledge that you are amassing every day with every member of staff, every bit of waste that you're processing or handling. That's all data. So if you can capture it, it's going to really, really help your performance over time.
Yeah. So thanks, Zoe. That this is really good. And I just want to add one or two points that you need to create a very clear incentives for stakeholders to collect the data, even within organizations. There is a big challenge of learning and data collection continuity and use of the data within the projects. So one thing which I learned that you need to see the project's portfolio folio within organization, both vertically and horizontally. So when you end one projects, how you move to the next project, and what are those interfaces which you need to be very, very careful. Similarly, if you are running 5 projects in an organization by different donors, what is the relationship between all these different projects? It's often a challenge to do those things. So thanks for that. I feel the next question about the operating cost is also related to this question from Mamta Jain about the data. So I will pass that to Terry, and perhaps Veronica may add something. So Terry, the question is about that the donors always uh, prefer to invest the one-off cost, infrastructure cost, training cost, or build up something. But when the project's finished, the O&M cost is not paid or is not looked after. So what is your advice on building that up during the project? Assume it's a 2-year project, and then so when the project ends, then the O&M things will be in place and project have a bit more continuity than the challenges. So over to you, Terry, on this question.
Yeah, it's good. I suppose because I guess, I mean, from a funder's perspective, you've got a set budget. You've got a set budget that you have to disburse. And in some cases, that budget can be cut even before the project starts. So it's often difficult to disperse funding, which kind of happens post project. What I would say is, I mean, as I was saying earlier in the piece, when you're actually writing the bid, what I would suggest is that maybe that you incorporate an element, a budget line within the bid for that, so that you can at least get some consideration of allocation of funding beforehand. It may not necessarily be dispersed, at the start of the project or midway through, but at least you would have some budget line that's built in, to be able to undertake that O&M and that sort of post-project work. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, no, that's good. Do you
Yeah.
want to add anything, Terry?
No. That's it. Yeah.
So that's good. I mean, I just wanted to bring in Veronica in this discussion because I know, Veronica, you were looking more or less last few years into the new type of funding. So private sector and the infrastructure way, which is not a traditional waste management type funding. So do you want to say a bit about what is the interest of the large private sector or corporate sector or any new type of funding in this game? Because I feel that the same type of funding often ends, but you need to move on to the new type of funding. So where is the new money?
Yeah, thanks, Mansoor. I think like I mean what Terry said is very valid. So starting considering these operating costs at the beginning, but I think also starting thinking, for example, about creative partnerships that you can create. So, for example, something you are discarding might actually be valuable for someone else. This could be, for example, cement plants are often quite interested in the leftovers from traditional recycling plants. So that's not a type of funding, that's more a type of partnership. In terms of funding, more and more like kind of impact investors, but also like climate funds are interested in funding like waste management projects. And in a lot of cases, they don't only look at like new infrastructure to be built, but also, for example, at funding companies which might be already operating. Or there are also like I'm currently working also on a technical assistance program. So there are also a number of these like smaller climate finance accelerator programs, which are interested in like supporting companies to become, for example, more investable and more attractive for investors. So I think also keeping an eye out for this type of opportunities, which are often even on LinkedIn, it's actually very important for the sector and for the smaller players in the sector.
Great. If I could add to that, if you don't mind, Mansoor, I think that's
Yeah, that's
both
okay.
brilliant
Yeah.
responses from Terry and Veronica. And just I've been looking at quite a few projects lately, and what like, I think it's totally natural that donors do not want to get involved in your OPEX, right? Like no donor wants to think that your waste management system can only survive with their ongoing funding year after year after year, because donors want to move on to support other things, and they can't if they're trapped paying for your waste management system, right? So that's why no donor wants to get involved in OPEX. But one mistake that I see over and over again is that people get excited at how much infrastructure or how much CapEx the donor will provide, but then OPEX is just not considered. And so people go for these quite expensive, high tech, high energy demanding systems that look great, but after 3 years, 5 years, it's just abandoned infrastructure. And look, I would say there is nowhere near enough finance in waste management already. We can't afford to be wasting the investment that we do get. So I would say when you're planning your CapEx and OPEX structure, so CapEx is the equipment and the infrastructure, and OPEX is your ongoing operational costs. So that's salaries, it's insurance, it's fuel, it's vehicle maintenance. Please don't forget the vehicle maintenance, because that's gonna, make or break that, and the price of fuel. Like Terry was saying, a war breaks out, suddenly fuel is double the price. Right? So we need to be really conservative with our assumptions about our OPEX and our revenue generating potential when we're designing the whole project. Because I keep seeing very expensive looking projects, assuming that, that a city government is going to keep on paying 3 million euros a year in OPEX, when as soon as that project's over, other priorities are going to come up, and bit by bit, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. But bit by bit, that whole system is likely to collapse, which is really sad to see, and that also damages people's hope and people's trust that this waste management challenge can be addressed. So I would say, please be really conservative and careful and mindful with your OPEX assumptions, because a waste management system really depends on you getting that bit right.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe. No, this is I mean, these are all very important and valid points from Veronica, Terry, and Zoe. There is one more question on the national database base replication. There's a bit of interest from after a presentation on the what are the starting points on the national database and where we can move on. So you take that, Zoe. I would like to go back to a couple of things to our panelist, and then we go back to the questions now. We like to keep it interactive. While in the meantime, our participants can think about more and more questions and comments, and we see whether we can do it within this time. And if you people like to stay and have a bit of chat and discussion, we will be there for another few minutes. So Terry, you said in your presentation, writing a clear bid and using a professional bid writer, and the communication is important. Now, I would like to challenge you back on this point, and I'm asking you that if you are reviewing a project proposal of certain amount, you have 1 hour to read the proposal because you have received so many proposals. It's a clearly written proposal. What are the 2, 3 things you would like to see or highlight in that allocated time? You got 40 pages to read in that plus annexes. So what will be your where your mind and thinking will go on with things which you want to check in the proposal prepared proposal? Over to you, Terry. Sorry, I made it a bit difficult for you, but let's see.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. It's a bit noisy because I'm in the office, but I'd say probably a few things. So one would be that there's clear strategic partnerships in place, and I like to see, for example, that you have like smaller and larger organizations kind of working together. I think that would be really really important. Um, I would say also that it addresses the local issues, and it's not a case where it's written in such a way that it's addressing what you know an international expert, let's say, think should be addressed, so it addresses the local issues. um, I would say if it also includes or facilitates innovation, because quite often you kind of see the same old thing, over and over. So if there's an element of innovation or facilitation of innovation in delivery, that's something that I would say would stand out as well. Um, I would say if it benefits the local communities and stakeholders, rather than again kind of that it benefits international consultants flying in and flying back out. And then I guess finally, that it kind of takes account of long term impact. So it kind of demonstrates that there will actually be not just short term but sort of medium and long term impacts as well, I would say.
Thanks, Terry. We got another 10, 15 minutes left, but we are happy to stay. And there is also comment from Roland. Good to see your comment, Roland, and welcome to the webinar. So my question, a different question to Veronica about Veronica, you already covered one example about the sustainability and the about how much people can do locally if they're given a chance. Do you want to give one more example when you have finished a project and you found in an article or a blog or maybe even a visit that something very different done by the project stakeholders? You may or may not have contributed to that, but something which unexpectedly exciting, which they have done because of local capacity.
Yeah, thank you, Mansoor. I think maybe just taking a little bit of a step back from your question, but I think like across all sectors, not just waste management, I think the idea of what happens after we finish the project and how to best evaluate that is a tricky one. Also because we have already spoken about like how much like funding are not a lot and it's becoming less and less. And also Terry mentioned at the beginning the fact that people tend to move on, which is very true. So I think like for me, one example that I can share goes back a little bit to the point I was talking about creating partnerships. So when I was at British International Investment, I ran a workshop in India for the investees, the British International Investment had in the renewable energy and infrastructure sector more broadly, including, for example, also e-mobility. And for me, like one thing that came out of this workshop and then that materialized like a few years later was the fact that some strong partnerships were built. So to give a concrete example, like I was talking to a renewable energy company, and they were struggling with how to manage wastewater coming from their labor camps. And so what happened through this workshop was that the company which was working on wastewater efficiency linked up with them, and then they established the partnership which carried on for years after that. And I think for me, this going back to this point of like linking up local stakeholders and making sure that they can build on each other's strengths is really important, and helps also like reducing risk related to like funding being cut, which unfortunately we have all seen, and also to like a project just coming to the end.
Thank you. So we have a couple of questions on the long-term planning, strategic planning, and there's one question on the guidelines, and there is one question from Roland about the net present value. I feel that Roland's question is a more technical one, which from this group, possibly Zoe touched on that point. So Zoe, you can take that question, but I suggest you can also answer a bit about the academy and question about the academy and the if the people like to start national database initiative in their countries, what are the key steps you suggest? And obviously they will link with you, but what would you suggest? What they think about it in the especially in the preparatory phase? So over to you, Zoe, with those two questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Mansoor, and thank you, Roland, for your addition here, sort of making the distinction, if you like, between the smaller projects and the larger ones, where investors really look deeply into the OPEX. And that's great. One thing that I would say that I've seen on larger projects, though, is because the larger projects tend to involve more international specialists that might not be overly familiar with the local context. And so assumptions can also be wrong then about the OPEX. Like, are they familiar with the fact that the roads wash away in rainy season? Or, you know, that the city doesn't have enough maintenance engineers to take care of this fleet? Real, like, down and gritty questions, you know, facts about life in that place that I think, and to be honest, I think this comes back to Veronica's much earlier point about making sure that we're always involving the local waste workers and really respecting the local knowledge that's already there when we plan for these larger projects. So I hope that addresses that comment, and thank you for adding it, Roland. I think it's an important distinction to make. Onto the waste data system. So what I've done is I've built something. So because this is for councils to report to the National Environment Agency on their waste data and open burning. And we know that the data is going to be really imperfect to start with, but you have to start somewhere, right? So what we've done is we've tried to keep it as simple as possible. There's maybe 20 data points each week that people have to fill in. And that's something as simple as the number of donkey cart trips to the dump site, number of tricycles bringing waste to the dump site, and then we've built in informed assumptions about how much each one of those is carrying, because there's no weighbridge in the Gambia, right? So we have to go by volume and then make assumptions about how that translates to tonnage. So we've got that number of trips to the disposal site, then how many incidences of open burning there are. Are they small backyard burns? Is it at schools, which is quite common, which is very sad indeed? Is it on a farm? So, you know, it's some big fields, but ultimately that's organic waste and it's not mixed waste that's being dumped. And from that, then we can, using the assumptions that are given in the Stockholm Convention, we can then estimate the the amount of persistent organic pollutants that are being emitted into the environment. And then that gives the Environment Agency a good starting point to say, okay, well, we know the data is imperfect now, but even with this imperfect data, we're seeing this, a lot of very toxic pollution coming into our population. So that can then help inform the health ministry. It can help attract more finance to waste management overall. It can help national government really understand the importance. What else? So other operational questions that we've asked in this waste data system are about how many vehicles do you have broken down this week? What is your fleet overall, and how many of them are actually running this week? Because that's a really helpful thing for you to be able to track as well. Okay, and whether or not fuel shortage has impacted your collection service. Because what we see is, we can do really great behavior change campaigns with the population, but you miss one collection and people will revert to burning their waste in their backyard. Yeah, it's a really delicate trust thing to try to change people's habits. You have to be reliable. All right. So if you're likely to have vehicles that are out of action frequently, then you need to adjust people's expectations around that as well. And then we've also got, how many tons are going to composting, recycling, other kinds of recovery, and so on. So that's just, it's a very simple start. And I know that some councils are still going to find that quite daunting. It's quite a lot of questions that we're asking. And like I said, we're not expecting them to have the answers to everything right now. But going week by week through the year, by the end of the year, hopefully they'll be starting to build a clearer picture and a more accurate picture of where they're at and therefore where they want to go. So that's on the waste data system. Mansoor, what would you like me to go on to now?
No, that's okay. I mean, you covered thing. I just wanted to pick up on those two questions. So one is the strategic planning period, and the other is the standard guidelines. So on the planning period question, if somebody asked me how much time do we need for a city strategic planning, and the population, let's assume, is 5 million, all that, I would say 5 years. But it's not a good answer because the issue is the municipal capacity, which I think Veronica and Zoe and Terry, all other speakers cover. The municipal capacity is not always at pace of what you suggest in the strategic planning cycle or period. So they need to build up that capacity. Part of that is money, part of that is skill, part of that is other thing. And then we talked about the contextual changes. So suddenly a policy comes and a big project comes, things speed up. Then suddenly a big project stops, a policy change, a good mayor moved, then things slow down. So you don't have the control over how you implement your strategic plan. And that is why the flexibility and opportunity is something which I learned matters a lot. So you need to be looking continuously for that, and how those things, you can bring those into account. I mean, water projects are different, transport projects are different. They can work on strategic planning cycle much more actively because those sectors are more infrastructure focused and less focused on people, informal sector, behavior side. There's whole social sciences attached to the waste management, which we often forget. So I suggest that is where the putting years on the plan is sometimes challenging. The next question is on the guidelines. Yes, there are a number of guidelines to select the technologies. And I mean, I remember they start writing 40, 50 years ago. They were very good guidelines, actually. You can still use. I suggest test them in the local context, which guidelines work, because which of some of the questions relevant in one context, some of the questions are not well relevant in another context. Apply those guidelines, create a case study with those guidelines, and see is what people think about those. The same thing relate back to what Zoe was saying about the data. Start with the smaller set of data and see how people behave and collect data, how much is correct and how much is incorrect, and then you build up that. If you give a very long set of data, it's very hard for municipalities to understand and collect and regularly create that, because politicians may not be available for more than 5 minutes or 10 minutes to listen to the story. So you need to create a very compelling story for the politicians in few minutes. And this takes me to the question about the advocacy, which is for example, incinerator. Yes, I mean, it's a big issue. In my own town, there was a big incinerator not far away from where I'm sitting, and people mobilized and combined, but the incinerator was built up. So I feel the key there is how you mobilize the momentum to stop these things, what advocacy you can bring in, how you can bring in the media, what alternatives you can put forward to that. I mean, one example which I always quote is there are cities where are the city alliances, but Urban Resource Center in Karachi, for example, doing it for now 30-40 years, and they really brought alternatives to many big proposals in a very effective way. They shelved and stopped the city development. Some people say have slowed down because of them, but they effectively did that together with other stakeholders. So I think these are the key things which we wanted to cover. We used our time for the webinar. I'm happy to stay and have a bit more chat if people are interested. But I think uh, thanks very much to all the participants for very active participation. Lots of good questions and comments. And thanks to the panel for great insight. And we did it as a discussion, which is really good. And I would like to hand over to Sweta to close it if there are no other comments and questions.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure. Before we close, Zoe, do you want to talk about the webinar series just for a bit, and then we could close up?
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yes, I would love to. Let me find the right button to share my screen. Thanks, guys. Hopefully you can just stay on for another couple of minutes because I have something exciting to share. Here we go. Right, are we in full screen? Yes, great. So back in 2024, the United Nations Environment Programme released the latest Global Waste Management Outlook, which I was the lead author of. The findings of that were quite stark, right? It basically said, look, waste arisings are growing and growing and growing and growing, particularly in regions of the world that don't yet have adequate waste management capacity to manage that waste, which means that we're going to have more and more uncontrolled waste, so open dumping and burning, and the negative impacts of all of that are going to double in a generation if we carry on the way we're going. Right, so something's not working, and I think it's been quite an interesting discussion today, kind of digging into certain elements where we know improvements could definitely be made. So following the outlook, I've launched my own startup called the Global Waste Lab, and that's in two parts. So I'm going to take you to the right-hand side of this screen now, because last week we're very excited to finally launch the Global Waste Lab Academy, and I'm grateful to Mansour for giving me these few minutes to share this with you. So the Global Waste Lab Academy is based on it's in response to one of the findings from the Global Waste Management Outlook, which is that there's just not enough capacity. We need practitioners, and we need experienced, knowledgeable, confident practitioners in every town and city around the world. It's one thing to be an international waste management expert, but there's not enough of us, and the expertise actually needs to be embedded in the places where the waste is being generated. That's the most sustainable thing that we could do. So what I've done is I've engaged with practitioners, experienced practitioners, just from 3 countries for now, but we're set to scale now. So we've got a course on waste and health from Geometry BN in Ethiopia. We have one on source separation. So when is it worth trying to get households to separate their waste? What do you need to have planned for the system around it for that to actually succeed in the long term? And that's from Lucien Yopper in Cameroon. And the final one is on food waste management. So dealing with these large food waste generators, markets, canteens, restaurants, that kind of thing, and helping identify First of all, how to change behaviors within the institution, if you like, that's generating all of this food waste, and then what to do with it. Yeah, how to prevent it, what to do with it, so that you're setting up plans that are going to last in the long term. And again, this comes back to our conversation about CapEx and OpEx, making sure that you are picking the right solution for that specific place. And all of these courses have been written by practitioners in resource constrained environments. So the idea is that we're platforming that knowledge that's definitely out there, but normally it's more people like us that make it to the webinars, so I wanted to make sure that people who are really experienced and in these places get the chance to share their knowledge and insights with other people who are maybe 5 to 10 years behind them. So please check that out, globalwastelab.com/academy, or you'll just find it from the homepage, Global Waste Lab. And finally, so this picture that we have in the middle, this is the 7 foundations that I've been developing, 7 foundations to a resilient waste management project. So perfect fit for this discussion today. And I'm very happy to announce that I'm going to be running a webinar series to discuss all of these 7 foundations. The webinars are going to take place between now and the International Solid Waste Association Congress, which is taking place in London in November. So that's ISWA 2026. And the whole webinar series about the foundations is being endorsed by the Chartered Institution of Waste Management, which are actually hosting the ISWA Congress. So we're going to be having these really interesting conversations with very experienced people from across the Global South. It's purely focused on these specific waste challenges in the Global South, where waste management systems are still developing or under pressure. Okay, so if you join these webinars, you can get CPD hours. So for those of you who track your continuing professional development hours, then please join us. And even if you don't, hopefully there'll be a lot to learn. So just a final slide then. So this is the ISWA Congress. We're very excited to be hosting it in London, which is my home city, this year coming in November. And if you are interested in finding out more, the early bird tickets are only available for about another week, right? So you need to get in there. So scan this QR code. I think Sweater's put a link in the chat as well. Thanks a lot, Sweater. And yeah, please take a look and submit an abstract if you've got something some research to share or an opinion that you think you really need to get across. And yeah, let's just make this ISWA and the webinar series leading up to it something that really involves all of you and all of your expertise and experience, because that's what we're really keen to surface. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you very much. Over and out.
Thank you, Zoe. First of all, for the attendees, Zoe's webinar series will go up on our website very soon. So do sign up to our newsletter, follow us on social media. You will get updates about it. You can sign up. It's going to be a free webinar series. So do sign up for it. And then thanks a lot to Terry, Mansoor, Veronica, and Zoe for the fantastic panel. I think we covered a lot of ground today. Thanks a lot, Mansoor. Mansoor is going to moderate one more webinar for us this year, which will be in the later part of the year. So attendees, please, once again, sign up to our newsletter. And the recording of this webinar will go up on our website and YouTube channel in 2 weeks' time. And we will share it again on the newsletter and social media. So thanks a lot, folks. Have a good day, good evening, wherever you're at. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.